All right, and we back on the forecast. So in the Bronx, New York, a 18-year-old brother named Ramarley Graham was shot in his own home in the bathroom by the police. Now let's see how this brother could get murdered by police in his own bathroom in front of his grandma and his 6-year-old little brother.
The surveillance video is dramatic and telling. At 3 p.m. Thursday, 18-year-old Ramarley Graham can be seen walking into his home on East 229th in the Bronx. The NYPD rushes in seconds later without a search warrant and try to gain entry.
And he's kicking the door because the door is locked. They came in with their gun drawn.
According to a resident who was inside during the forced entry,
they did not scream police.
And there is no sign of a search warrant. The surveillance video is high grade. Its clarity, that of a professional. Clearly, the officers are seen desperately trying to break into the house through the front door. The damage evident once we got our cameras inside. The video also shows the NYPD entering through the back and then unlocking the front door. Once in, the race upstairs to Graham is on. And moments later,
Boom, boom.
is all Paulette Minzy heard. In her bathroom and barely dressed, she suddenly had a gun in her face. Minzy then put her hands up and screams,
I'm the landlord, I'm the landlord.
Minzy said the NYPD then searched her home. They found no gun. On the second floor, an unarmed Ramarley Graham was dead. After everything that's happened and the death of the young boy,
The death of the young boy. And
how do you trust police?
I can't trust them. I'm scared of them. Right now I'm scared of my life because I don't know what they will do. Because, I don't know what they're doing if they saw me. I'm so scared.
Do you think they're doing their job?
No, they're not. They're not doing their job. They're not doing their job. They're cruel. They're very cruel, and I'm scared of my life because the cops come and put the gun in my face. I'm so scared.
So the Street Narcotic Enforcement Unit saw Ramarley Graham coming out of a bodega, adjusting and tugging at a gun on his waistband as he was coming out of the store. So Sergeant Scott Morris, Officer John Mcloughin, and Officer Richard Haste decided to follow this young brother from the store to his apartment. Now, when the cops couldn't get in, there's surveillance video of them banging on the door, kicking on the door, doing everything they can to get in. And eventually, one of the cops gets in through the back door and lets the rest of them in. Now, Ramarley Graham's grandmother said she never heard the police identify themselves when they came in. Now, mind you, the police aren't supposed to enter any home unless they have a warrant or it's a medical emergency. And there was no medical emergency, and these cops didn't have a warrant. But after Officer John Mcloughin kicked the door in, Officer Richard Haste ran in and shot Ramarley Graham in the chest. Now, of course, Officer Richard Haste blamed everything on Ramarley Graham, claiming that he rushed him and then ducked into the bathroom. Initially, police said there was a struggle and that Ramarley may have been trying to grab for his waistband. Officer Richard Haste claimed he said, "Show me your hands," and then screamed, "Gun, gun," before shooting him one time in the chest, claiming that he thought he saw a gun. The problem is, this young brother was unarmed, and there wasn't a gun anywhere in the house. They also said he was trying to dump a bag of weed in the toilet. Now, first of all, in New York, depending on how much you have, weed is nothing but a ticket. And second, if he was trying to dump weed down the toilet, how was he struggling with the police and reaching for his waistband at the same time? Jonathan Hayes said, "I know what I did was justified. I protected myself and my team based off what we knew at the time." So originally, Officer Richard Haste was placed on modified duty. And eventually, 4 months later, he was brought up on manslaughter charges.
It is our intention to push on with this case, to make sure that the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney move forward with charges of civil rights violations because justice was not served in Bronx County today.
I just want to say, February 2nd happened yesterday all over again. It seems like it's a never-ending situation when it comes to our kids. We have to stand here and fight and to prove they're innocent while cops around the city running around, walking around free after they murdered somebody's kids. Ramarley had a mother. Ramarley had a father. The modern-day lynching has to stop. It's only a different way of them doing it, gunning down our kids. We know what happened. We know Scott Morris and Richard Haste went to my house and murdered my child.
I stand before you here today, but even though you're standing in front of me, it's like I'm in a dark place, because everything just seems dark to me. My son is gone. My son is gone. And Richard Haste is able to go back and do his job and maybe kill again. And we have to ask ourselves this question. Had Ramarley been white, would this have happened? Would they have run in a white person's home? Ramarley is dead on no cause of his own. He was in his house where you're supposed to be free and safe, and he's dead.
But a Bronx Supreme Court Justice, Steven Barrett, dismissed the indictment because he claims the prosecution gave the grand jury flawed instruction. Then after Judge Steven Barrett dismissed the original indictment, the grand jury declined to re-indict Richard Haste.
A judge throws out the indictment against police officer Richard Haste. He's the man who killed unarmed Bronx teen Ramarley Graham in his home last year. The decision infuriated Graham's parents. They spoke to our Brittany Miller just hours after the announcement. She has this interview that you'll only see on 12.
Justice and peace, two things the family of Ramarley Graham say were absent from the courtroom Wednesday morning when the indictment against Officer Richard Haste was tossed out and the charges dropped. A Bronx judge called instructions to the grand jury misleading, saying the Bronx DA's office was incorrect in telling the grand jury to disregard communication to Richard Haste that Ramarley may be armed.
The judge made a difficult but correct decision here. There's no winners or losers in this case.
I don't care what the PBA might say, there's no winners here. I would love to have my son. So we are definitely the losers.
In an exclusive sit-down with Ramarley's parents, Frank Graham and Constance Malcolm, the pair dished the details of what was running through their minds when they heard the judge's decision, especially Malcolm.
And I felt that I had to make him see my pain, show him what he did to my family and what he did to me.
I don't care. What more can you do to me? What more can you do to me?
What more can you do to me? You already took my child. Lock me up ain't gonna do anything for me. So you do what you want to do, because I'm a mom and I'm going to continue to fight, because the fight that's over here, it don't stop here, it's going to continue.
Meanwhile, the Bronx DA's office was told it could represent the case to a grand jury, a move Graham doesn't want the DA to make.
I don't know if anyone in that office will try this case properly, because the DA worked closely with the NYPD, and it's like they're buddies. So how can I trust them to send their buddies to prison?
Both Frank and Constance say they understand the dismissal of the charges doesn't mean the case is completely over. In fact, they say this is just the beginning.
We are going to get justice. We are going to shut this city down.
And the Graham family says they will continue to fight. They plan on holding a rally right here in front of their house on East 229th Street at 1 p.m. on Saturday.
Even though an internal review found he used poor tactical judgment and they recommend his dismissal. But he ended up resigning before they could fire him. So before they actually fired Richard Haste and took his gun and badge away from him, he resigned and now it won't show up on his record that he got fired. So if he applies at the next police department, he won't have to explain why he got fired. And since this murder was justified, he doesn't have to mention it at all.
It has been 5 years since that controversial shooting. Today, new outrage from the victim's family and new insight into this ex-officer. CBS 2's Jessica Layton spoke with him, and she joins us live in the Throdsnick section of the Bronx. Jessica.
And Christine, this is really the first time we have ever heard from now ex-NYPD officer Richard Haste. Tonight he told me he was only doing what his training told him to do, but he has thought about that day every day for the past 5 years.
5 years later, again, I'm standing here with a slap in the face. Richard Haste was allowed
to resign.
A deep scarring wound has opened back up for the mother of Ramarley Graham after learning the NYPD officer who shot and killed her teenage son in 2012 was allowed to resign before the likely fate of being fired.
And as I stand here, I have no answer as a mother. How can I move forward and heal?
Surrounded by supporters, Constance Malcolm was emotional talking about the loss with anger directed at City Hall for allowing Richard Haste to walk away from the job before the police commissioner could officially pull his badge. The mayor refusing to answer questions about the case from CBS 2 political reporter Marsha Kramer Monday.
Mr. Mayor, Ramarley Graham's family is angry. Will you meet with him? Will you meet with Ramarley Graham's family?
We spoke with the now ex-NYPD cop outside his home in the Bronx Monday night.
The outcome, it was a tragedy. Nobody wanted to be there. Nobody wanted that to happen. Monday morning quarterbacking, no one did that more than myself. Did we do it right? Did we get in there, do the right thing?
Haste has been on modified duty since the fatal shooting of the unarmed Bronx teen, fighting for his job along the way until now. After a judge ruled he used poor tactical judgment and he should be fired, he filed paperwork for his own resignation. Would you do it the same?
I can't, with the information that I had, I don't think I could do it differently. None of that day happened with any hate, malice, or intent. It was just, cops going after a guy with a gun.
To point out once again, it was discovered that Graham was unarmed that day. He had no gun when he was shot and killed that day in the Bronx. Today, his mother called Richard Haste reckless, and I asked Haste tonight what he thought about being called reckless. He paused for a long time, and he carefully chose his words, saying he cannot begin to imagine the pain that their family has gone through. He essentially lost his job in all this, but they lost a brother and a son.
Not that it matters, it's not like that affects these police department decisions, but it's still not on his record at all. Now, apparently, according to the paperwork, Richard Haste hadn't been trained in street-level narcotic or plainclothes work. Even though Ramarley Graham's family demanded this police officer's history be made public, they did everything they could to protect this officer. Richard Haste left the department before his full disciplinary history was released to the public. The only problem was an anonymous former employee for the Civilian Complaint Review Board leaked a copy of his disciplinary record. And it turns out Richard Haste had 6 complaints logged against him, all in the span of 13 months before he shot this young brother. In all, he had 10 allegations against him, including using physical force, using pepper spray, offensive language, and making an abusive frisk. 4 of the allegations were removed completely from the document. And then you have Mayor Bill De Blasio with his black wife co-signing all of this stuff. Now, I understand people want to date and marry whoever they want to marry, and it's none of my business. But the problem is, how can you take a stand against black children or black people in general being murdered and gunned down by the police and still stand beside somebody like Bill De Blasio, who co-signed and justified all of it, who is co-signing and justifying the murder of young black people, of young black brothers? No matter how much you think they love you, they're not going to fight to get rid of their privilege for you. White men and women who have biracial children don't seem to want to do it for their own kids, so why would they do it for you? They know how to compartmentalize sex and power. They don't have a problem having sex with you. They have a problem when you talk about replacing this system. They have a problem when you talk about justice. They have a problem when you talk about no longer being subject to their laws and to their punishments. Then they have a problem. No matter how much sex they have or how many children they bear. At the end of the day, their position in society means more to them than any of that. And until we can get that urgency that they have to maintain their position, when the blood of our children or our elderly or any of us is spilled, then we'll continue to have the same arguments, the same problems, the same discussions another 100 years from now.
Retired from NYPD 11 years ago. I joined the force in '84. And I'm here to tell you all I'm here to tell you all that in every single one of these cases with the Chantel Davis, and I had the misfortune of mentioning that the police were going to start killing our women, and 2 weeks later, Chantel was the first one that was gunned down. And I feel bad for foretelling that, but when you have police out here running ragged, sooner or later you knew that that was going to happen. And I'm here to tell you again that in all of these cases, NYPD violated all of the rules and regulations in that point. In Chantel Davis' case, a police officer is never, ever, ever to shoot at a car, a moving car, not unless the person in the car, someone in the car, is shooting at the police. And in that case with Chantel Davis, that officer was not supposed to fire. That officer shouldn't even been on the street, because like what was said, there were 6 other lawsuits pending against that officer. And you can't tell me that he couldn't have been on desk duty, you know, until they were settled. And the Kenneth Chamberlain case, which is a mirror of Eleanor Bumpur's case, the White Plains Police took their training from NYPD. So if they took their training from NYPD, when you have a barricaded person, you take all the time necessary, because the only person they can hurt is themselves. And most people have said, I would rather the person hurt themselves than the police to come out and kill them. You know, because Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. knew what he was doing. He wasn't a person who was losing his mind. He made a mistake and he tripped off his medic alert. He got on the phone and he told the people that it was a mistake and that it was no need for the police to come. So for the police to come and kick his door down when he had a relative who came to the floor and said, listen, that's my relative, I have keys, let me go in there and calm my relative down. They refused to let that woman go in there and calm her relative down, but then they used racial epithets as what was said to lure him out as a tactic. Well, let me tell you something. With my 20 years on the force, and I had to sometimes arrest Caucasian people, if I would have called them a racial epithet, I think I would have lost my job once I'd have told my boss, oh, I just used it as a tactic, you know, to calm the person down, you know. In Ramarley Graham case here, we have it on video. We have it on video where the officer, like Constance said, police are never supposed to enter a residence, not unless they have a search warrant or in an emergency situation. There was no emergency situation here. They started kicking the door down from the minute they came on the property. And they were able to gain entry through the back, forcing someone to open up their door and run them through their house under duress with a gun in their face. And then they commenced to going upstairs, kicking Ramarley's door in and firing in front of his grandmother and his 6-year-old brother. That was wrong. In the Sean Bell incident, it was wrong. Listen, I can go on and on and on. But what hurts me and really displeases me is that although I'm retired, there's a lot of other black and Hispanic officers that's out here retired too. You know? And they need to be out here when these injustices are going on. And it teased me off that they don't. But yet and still, when one of ours was falsely arrested by NYPD a year ago, they called me, and it was over 250 of us that was going to go down to One Police Plaza, and then the district attorney, Cy Vance, blinked and said, y'all don't have to come down, we're going to cut them loose. And that was only 250 officers. So imagine if those same 250 officers was to come out here in our neighborhoods when the police have violated our people. Imagine how much power we can have, because I told them all, when it comes time to lock up anybody, we, the 250 ex-police officers are the first ones to get our heads busted and the first ones to go in the jail cell, because we know that cops won't dare want to bust our heads in front of everybody else, because they know that we will damn sure fight them back, and they know. So I'm going to continue to support this family and every other family, and I'm going to continue to speak out against the mistreatment, abuse, and murder that not just NYPD, but any police or any police department, because they're really not a department. What they are is an organization. That's what all of these law enforcement agencies that have perpetuated violence and killed our people, they're not police law enforcement agencies, they're organizations, because a law enforcement agency follows their own rules and regulations, and they will chastise their officers. So along with NYPD, I will call NYPD an organization, not a department, until they stand for what a department does.
First tonight, the future for an NYPD officer who fired the fatal shot is being debated at an NYPD trial. Officer Richard Haste was originally charged with manslaughter in the death of Ramarley Graham in 2012, but Haste was never prosecuted. Graham's family says the officer should lose his job. CBS 2's Andrea Grimes with the new information tonight in Lower Manhattan.
My purpose is to make sure Richard Haste is fired.
A mother's fight for her son and an NYPD officer's fight to keep his job.
Officer Haste, although he knows he committed no misconduct, is remorseful for the loss of a life.
The NYPD disciplinary trial began today for Officer Richard Haste, who shot and killed Ramarley Graham inside his Bronx home back in February of 2012. Haste was part of a narcotics unit on patrol, and one of his fellow cops radioed that Graham had a gun. Haste followed Graham inside, not knowing it was his apartment, his attorney says, and shot him in a bathroom when he thought Graham was reaching for a weapon. No gun was found. Haste's attorney says Graham never showed his hands, as he was instructed to do before the shooting. In the proceedings today, Haste's attorney pointed out the NYPD Firearm Discharge Review Board ruled the shooting itself justified, but that he did not use proper tactics.
If the shooting is justified, the tactics should be justified. And in this case, they're looking for a scapegoat because of the unfortunate outcome of the shooting.
The NYPD attorney said in opening statements that police never should have broken down Graham's door, saying, quote, Officer Haste exercised poor tactical judgment, which led to the discharge of his firearm, causing Graham's death. This departmental trial is expected to last through the end of this week. The NYPD Deputy Commissioner of Trials will then make a recommendation to the police commissioner, who has the final say on whether or not Haste is fired. His attorney expects a decision within the next 60 to 90 days.
I was telling during this, I told him twice to stop, stop, stop.
Why did you tell him stop, stop?
I wanted him to stop the car. And I could feel his car turning left into me. So I'm falling backwards, and I'm falling lower and lower. I'm falling lower and lower against his driver's door. I remember thinking, oh my God, that he's going to run me over and he's going to kill me. That he's actively dragging me with his car right now, and my arm is stuck in there. And I cannot get it out. And he's turning left into me with his car. He's got his foot mashed in the accelerator, and his back tire is going to run me over.
You intentionally shot him in the head, correct?
Sir, I fired at him because I thought he was going to kill me.
You testified that the only thing you'd see was his head, and you fired your weapon. You aimed your weapon and fired it at his head, correct?
Yes, because my body was falling backwards, and I was falling low against his driver's door, and I was looking up, and that's the only part of his body I could see.
The undershirt that was taken from you on July 19th at University Hospital
had writing on it that said Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee, I believe, correct?
Yes, sir.
And centered in the middle of that was a Confederate flag, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and does a Confederate flag mean anything to you?
It has no meaning to me, no.
What was the purpose of did you have any purpose in putting that particular shirt on that day?
I had a certain number of black shirts in my rotation to wear for my summer uniform for UC, and you kind of want to wear older t-shirts because when it's hot out in your vest, you start sweating a lot and your t-shirt gets soaked with sweat. The t-shirt was bought 4 or 5 years ago. I believe a relative who visited Gatlinburg, they'd bought that shirt for me and brought it back.
Outrage from some people in Westchester County tonight after they say Nazi propaganda was sold at a gun show this weekend. CBS 2's Jessica Borg with the story, new at 6 tonight.
It's actually sickening.
New Rochelle resident and mom of 2, Stephanie Frankel, says she's furious over these pictures. Books apparently being sold at the gun show this past weekend at the Westchester County Center.
You have Mein Kampf, you have Hitler's letters and notes. I was Hitler's chauffeur.
The Westchester Democratic Legislature says a member of its staff took these pictures showing Nazi literature and items with the Confederate flags being sold by vendors.
Symbols of hate have no place in our county.
The gun show itself is controversial in Westchester County. There hasn't been one in 4 years since the Sandy Hook school shootings. 2 weeks ago, the County Board of Legislators voted 9-8 to ban the gun show from coming here to the county center. Last Thursday, the county executive vetoed that ban. Phil Oliva is the senior advisor to County Executive Rob Astorino. He says the gun show had a record turnout, 8,000 people over 2 days, bringing between $40,000 to $50,000 in revenue to the county. Oliva says he was at the gun show and didn't see anything racist or anti-Semitic being sold.
I saw beef jerky, I saw belts, firearms, hats. I did not see the books that they had.
He says the close-ups of the books that have been circulating could have been taken anywhere.
Could have been from a local public library, because you can go to any Westchester County library today and get those books out. So, I mean, they are historical books.
He claims it's controversy being stirred up by political opponents. Meanwhile, the legislature